Good evening, Mayor and Council. It is now 7 p.m. and we are live online.
Okay.
I'm waiting for DOT approval to go to bid.
Okay. I'm going to call the meeting to order. Let's do a pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right. Let's do a roll call. I see Molly, Jeff, Amber, Lee, Pam, Dan, Paloma. Is she online by any chance?
No, not at this time.
Okay. And then I see the city attorney, the city administrator. Is there anyone from representing the city online? Okay.
No.
First thing we always do is public comments. There is a public hearing this evening which concerns parking requirements. So if you're here to speak on that, hold your comments for that. And the first thing we do is just general public comments. You can take up to 3 minutes on any topic, as long as it's reasonably relevant to the city. All right. And first one is Arthur Gammons.
Good evening, everyone. Arthur Gammons, 39 Roundabout Avenue. I'm going to speak about the recent swearing-in ceremony of the City Council. Inviting our congressmen to our City Council swearing-in ceremony is not required. It's a political decision, especially given all the protests in his office beforehand. So it is certainly within the rights of citizens to make their political statement at the event. With Martin Luther King Day just passed, I know you are all aware, and I hope supportive, of the long, honorable history of effective civil disobedience and direct action in the cause of social justice and human rights. I know you all reject Trump's strongman appeal of only I can solve our problems. You surely know that appeal thrives on people's perception that they are powerless and that democracy is ineffective. The antidote is direct citizen engagement, not just in an election, but day-to-day participation. So, it is with shock, grave concern, and deep disappointment that a civilian member of the Beacon City administration took it upon himself to forcibly intervene in a peaceful, citizen-led action at the City Council swearing-in ceremony, grabbing the banner from the hands of someone holding a baby, putting his hands on another individual, ripping a sign, and reportedly calling on the police for arrest. By any reasonable measure, not his job and way beyond the authority of his position. The behavior was deplorable and unacceptable. I don't know whether each of you agree or undecided or disagree with the demand that Congressman Ryan call for a ceasefire and an end to the U.S. military aid for Israel's genocidal war on Gaza. In fact, many cities around the country have passed a resolution to demand it. But no matter what, our cities should be honoring and encouraging citizen engagement, even when it is disruptive, rather than suppressing it. Some perspective is in order. That minor inconvenience pales in comparison to what is happening in Gaza every hour. That incident is now public. It's been reported in the media. So I call on the City Council and the Mayor to publicly denounce such suppression of legitimate dissent. Now, silence would be construed as support for the interference. Hopefully, we are better than that in Beacon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I just will point out that this raises a personnel matter, and while we certainly do want to hear any input from the public, please recognize that as a personnel matter, this will be dealt with appropriately, but not in public. Next is Elaine. Elaine, you're on for the public hearing on parking, right? So yeah, just wait, sorry. Donna Minkowitz.
Hi, everybody. My name is Donna Minkowitz, and I live in Ward 1. As a citizen of Beacon and someone who pays part of our city administrator's salary, I would like to ask him why he thought it was appropriate and within the purview of his power as the city administrator to forcibly seize a banner held by a Beacon resident engaging in peaceful, silent protest.
So I gather you recognize that we won't answer questions, but go ahead.
Yes, I would like my questions answered. And to seize it and hold it closed to prevent him from unfurling it silently at the back of the room at a public meeting, while this Beacon resident was holding an infant, no less. I'd also like to ask my city administrator why he could possibly think it was legitimate and within his rights to grab a sign from another protester and tear it in half. The fact is, neither of these acts could possibly be justified. We have a First Amendment in this country that still applies here in Beacon, which means that the government is never allowed to act by force to prevent peaceful protest. The fact that Administrator Chris White actually used a very physical force and put his hands on both these protesters is even more appalling and even more contrary to the spirit of the First Amendment. Our city officials are not supposed to engage in violence in the administration of their duties, not supposed to escalate situations into violence, and not supposed to put their hands on members of the public. I would like assurances from the mayor, from members of the city council, and from Administrator Chris White himself that he will respect the First Amendment and Beaconites' physical integrity going forward, and that city officials will never act with such violence and disrespect towards peaceful protesters and fellow residents of Beacon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Chiara DeLillo? Thank you.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chiara DeLello. I live in Ward 3. I'm a teacher and a writer here in Beacon. I would just like to echo the comments about Chris White's behavior. It's appalling, it's disappointing, it's chilling, actually, considering what it implies, especially to have I think that is why it's important. I understand that you won't answer questions, and I understand that the personnel side of the matter will be resolved elsewhere, but I would like assurances from the mayor and from the council that this is not a behavior that will be repeated. It was stifling of peaceful free speech for an ongoing atrocity that has been well documented, and it was not directed at Chris White. It was directed at Pat Ryan. And so this would have affected absolutely no one except Pat Ryan had this intervention and this escalation not occurred. Putting hands on other people, destroying their property, keeping them from speaking their piece, those are behaviors I wouldn't allow in my 5th grade classroom. And so I am here as an educator to say this is unacceptable from a public servant. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Is it Tony?
Hi, good evening. My name is Tony Meck. I'm a Beacon resident, and I also am here tonight to ask the City Council to please affirm and protect the right of all Beaconites to peacefully protest. I was deeply concerned to see the stifling of a peaceful, silent protest on the January 6th swearing-in ceremony by the city administrator and other civilian individuals. I would hope that city employees and elected officials would welcome this kind of civic engagement in our political process and respond to the issues raised, rather than physically and forcibly shut the protest down. Community members who are advocating for a ceasefire and for New York State's divestment from militarism and reinvestment in our local communities have used so many available means to communicate with our electeds, from phone calls to letters to marches to banners to protests. Actions like these strengthen our democracy and our community by calling on our electeds to join with their constituents in standing against violence. I believe that no one who is asking for an end to violence should have hands laid on them by those who are employed for public service. I hope that those who participated in physically removing the protesters forcibly, including the city administrator, are held accountable for their actions, and that the City of Beacon vocally and materially affirms the right of the community to peacefully protest. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Teresa Kraft.
Teresa Kraft, resident of Beacon. Whoa, I saw the video, and I see how it's blown out of, depends on how you look at it. To me, it looked like, talk to you soon, guy. We as Americans can't pick and choose which amendments we want to follow. It's okay to follow one and not the other when you're doing your thing. I believe we all need to take a chill pill and embrace every resident with the same respect. I believe the protesters should have been stopped from entering the building. Hiding behind a mask and a child is in fact what's troubling. I would hope the city follows due process and requires all employees to undertake anger management when necessary and open up that maybe to the residents. Maybe we can have a workshop on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. James Case Leal.
Hi, good evening. My name is James Case Leal. I live at 55 Sargent Avenue here in Beacon. I wrote the city council earlier about this, and I did receive a reply from Nick, and I appreciate that. I understand that's under review. The subject is around the conduct of Mr. White, or the alleged conduct of Mr. White, as I've seen reported in the news outlets and online and social media. I want to begin with just acknowledging that I don't know exactly what happened. I wasn't there, right? I only know what it looked like when I saw it online and when I saw it in the news. I also know, as I'm sure all of you know too well, that when you take the oath of office and you represent the city of Beacon, that the way you conduct yourself matters. The optics of how you conduct yourself does matter. And regardless of what did actually happen, may or may not have happened, I believe that it looked very bad. If we're getting something wrong, if there are some facts that we don't know about, I do apologize to Mr. White. But what I really want from the city is clarity. I want to know this summer if there's a Trump march down Main Street, authorized or not, if I should follow the protocol to go down there and start ripping signs out of people's hands. Or if a traffic highway department worker has that same authority to get out of their truck and stop protesters who may be obstructing traffic. That, I think, we are owed from the city is an explanation of clarity of what is the proper procedure, and if we should follow what appeared to be the behavior that was modeled by Mr. White. I understand that this is under review, and I appreciate that. I do believe that this represents a violation of public trust, and so I would very much appreciate some way, and I don't know exactly what the legal way might be, for you to move around the executive privilege and the privacy of Mr. White. Perhaps even a statement from Mr. White himself would be sufficient. But I do believe the public deserves some kind of acknowledgement of this, and for you all to express your faith, because we voted for you. And if you can vouch for him, and you can vouch for this conduct, I think that we will all be very reassured. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That's all I got on the list. Does anyone else in the physical audience want to make a comment? This is your opportunity, unless, of course, it's about parking, in which case, just wait.
Good evening, Clark Gebman, 2 Wilson Street. Newsflash. They didn't need your vote. They were uncontested. I am so tempted to pile on city manager, but I'm not going to. Rather, I'm going to just inform the public that the process for recall in the city of Beacon of the council and this form of government would require about 100 signatures collected by the speakers tonight alone. The city council would have 2 months to chat about it, and then another 5% of voters, or about another 250 or 300, would be required to be able to force the matter as long as the Board of Elections had received the information by August, and at which time the city residents could actually change the form of government to be one where the neighbors control the government rather than the city council, And the city, the neighbors, appoint a mayor, give him a wage, and run the city and be responsible for the actions of reporting the audit, reporting bidding that conforms to the good senses of not escalating city debt, reporting that the city council had the dignity and the self-respect not to cut public discourse from 5 minutes to 3 minutes and call it progress. We are and have the potential to be the Norman Rockwell community, whatever those pictures and that artwork embrace our hearts. But I've watched for 20 years, time and time and time again, that this city government moves in the opposite direction. And my last words to the council were 3. Actually, they were repetitive. Shame, shame, and shame. Listen, you know, maybe I had the good benefit of having very powerful student kind of roles in my youth. So I understood that discourse and debate was an inherently intrinsic part of democracy, and that one should never fear
15 seconds.
and but recognize that power gets drunk and abused. And that's what we're looking at here, folks. I'm sorry to say.
Thank you. Anyone else in the physical public want to make a comment other than about parking? Because we're getting to that next. All right, anyone online, Ben? No, in a minute we'll do parking. Don't worry. You'll be here.
If you're on Zoom and you'd like to make a public comment, please use the raise hand option at the bottom of your screen. If you're joining by phone, you will need to press *9. And if you are watching on YouTube, you will need to join the Zoom instead by visiting beaconny.gov and looking at the calendar section where we have a link to the Zoom. Right now, we do have one hand raised, and that is for Beacon for Black Lives. Just as a matter of practice, we do require our speakers to identify a name, home municipality, and any organization that they're affiliated with, so please go ahead and do that. I have allowed you to speak Beacon for Black Lives whenever you're ready.
Hi, sorry, this is Justice McCrae, and I'm here representing myself, not Beacon for Black Lives. I just didn't have the option to change my name on the Zoom. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Fantastic,
Yes.
Thank you. Sorry about that. I am just chiming in to say that tonight the city of Newburgh is voting on a resolution in support of immediate and permanent humanitarian ceasefire, and hundreds of cities and towns all over the country have voted on similar resolutions, and I really do want to encourage the city of Beacon to create a resolution similar and vote for a resolution to demand a ceasefire as well. And I know that there are folks at that table that believe that it is the council's duty to focus only on what happens in the city, but this international crisis, this global crisis, impacts all of us. And every one of us has a voice, and I think especially at that seat, in any level of government power, it's important to use that voice. And I really want to encourage this council to consider writing a resolution just as Newburgh has done and hopefully passes tonight. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Justice. Okay, was that it online, Ben?
There are no further hands raised online at this time.
Okay, so let's move on to the public hearing. So I'm going to open the public hearing on proposal of local law 1, which concerns minimum parking requirements. And Nick, will you give us a background on that?
I will, Mayor. I'm not sure if my microphone is working.
I think it.
You good?
Yeah.
Good, okay, good. So this is a local law on proposed amendments to the zoning code concerning parking. This has been workshopped a couple of occasions. It was also referred to the county and city planning board, who provided a report and recommendation as set forth in the agenda packet. There's also in the agenda packet the proposed local law, as well as the environmental assessment form that provides a narrative of the law. I'm just going to briefly describe the local law. It's to amend the text of Section 223-26 of the zoning code concerning parking requirements. Presently, the zoning code mandates minimum parking requirements for all new development within the city. However, at times, such minimum parking requirements conflict with the city's planning goals to encourage the efficient use of diverse land uses, including multi-story buildings and walkable areas. Thus, the proposed local law would eliminate minimum parking requirements within the city, except for 1- and 2-family dwellings, as well as accessory apartments, which shall require at least 1 parking space per dwelling unit. Instead of there being a required minimum number of parking spaces, the planning board will have the ability to determine the appropriate number of parking spaces for mixed uses, commercial, multifamily dwellings on a case-by-case basis. And this is a law similar to what was adopted in the city of Kingston and in other municipalities that are looking at that, typically smaller cities as opposed to suburban towns where cities have parking lots or on-street parking, and the proposed uses are all sort of adjacent to each other, nearby within walking distance. So this proposed local law would eliminate the minimum parking requirements and refer that to the planning board for their determination on a project-by-project basis.
And just remind me again, I know you summarized it, we still would have minimum parking requirements for
Single-family, 2-family, and accessory dwelling units.
which is about more than 80% of our land, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So this only concerns the remaining.
Correct.
Got it. Okay. So I'll open the public hearing on this. I've got a few people that signed up, and of course you got first priority. So come on up, Elaine. Nice to see you. Come talk to us. Oh, and I will say, for those who are on a board, I will assume that none of your comments are because you are on a board, that you're speaking as an individual, and I'll just say that up front because I'm seeing some board members here, right? So, thank you.
Speaking as a citizen, Elaine Chacho, North Elm Street. I haven't done this in a while. I've been watching the discussions of changes to the parking requirements and have been alarmed at some of the discussions. For some time now, tightening our zoning laws has been used by people running for city office as a call to arms. Now, flexibility and discretion are the bywords. At the last workshop, it was stated that there will be no change in residential neighborhoods. There will still be minimums for single-family, 2-family, and accessory dwellings. That's only partially true. The minimum is being reduced from 2 spots per unit to 1 spot per unit. Depending on where these lots are located, that could become an issue. Does this change really reduce the costs or merely shift it to the public? It could create far less available public parking. It pushes more and more parking into adjoining residential neighborhoods. What is the public benefit? Aside from the possible, and I do mean possible, not probable, addition of a few more affordable units, which certainly are not guaranteed. Why are we giving benefits to developers without some return? How will this affect the quality of life for our current residents? The new law seems ambiguous, and after listening to several discussions on the council and on the planning board, it seems to not be fully understood. It is inappropriate to put every decision about parking supply in the hands of developers and the planning board without guidelines to protect the public. The myth that you don't need a car to live in Beacon, you can say it all you want, and maybe you can get by without a car, but it's really difficult. And I would also ask, since you're going to workshop this again next week, please do not close the public hearing today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Kevin Byrne. And for board members here tonight, I just want to thank you for your service. I know it's hard, and I'm very appreciative. You give up enough nights as it is, but I know you're speaking for yourself.
Yes, you preempted me. So yeah, Kevin Byrne, 61 Tyranda. I've been on the board for a little while. I've seen some contentious. Okay, I've been involved with some fairly contentious developments, some of which the issues were about parking. And my concern about this law is, first of all, it's really unclear to me what the beneficial intent is. It basically loosens up, it makes less clear what the expectations for development projects are because of the process, the way that the application process works is that a developer makes a proposal, developer has a consultant, developer has lawyers, but developer has a whole series of consultants that provide them with arguments to back up the set of developments, the set of whatever they want to provide in various positions. The board basically only has its judgment, and there is, if we have a consultant, that consultant generally just critiques the process that was used for the developer's consultant to make their recommendation. We're not in a position to make a counter proposal or start doing urban planning studies or other things during the midst of a process in order to counter what a developer would like to do for whatever reason on a certain property. So that's a practical impediment to getting the correct amount of parking or for having the city's interests defended in the planning process. There's other problems that I think, those are some of the procedural ones that I could see from the beginning. The other effect, one effect that this is going to have is that there's a very good, it's fairly likely that developments can become more dense and they could have much more parking impact on adjacent residential and other neighborhoods. Because when the way that we have form-based zoning, one of the main limits to the density of a project is how much parking is required, right? And we've seen that in a number of projects that, for one reason or another, the amount of parking takes up the amount of surface area and they're limited in the amount of floors they can have. So if someone can develop an entire lot without providing any parking or with a minimum amount of parking.
15 seconds.
Yeah, so that's, it will make things, it will make development more dense. It will subsidize, or it's an encouragement to development for, and in many cases, residential development. And I'm not sure if that's something that we necessarily need to do right now.
Thank you. Atticus Lanigan.
Hello. I'm Atticus Lanigan. I live at 37 Cross Street. And I just want to cover some points that Elaine and Kevin didn't cover. And also, Dave Jensen was a part of our conversation offline. So I'm an urban planner by trade, and parking is very important to me, mostly because most people don't care about parking unless it's an issue that's sitting right in front of them and is affecting them personally or affecting their business personally. I've seen basically the effects of that where parking is not considered a portion of public space, and which makes it wildly important, and therefore tends to be thrown into quick change Band-Aid legislation like the one that we're talking about today. Have a lot to cover. So basically the beneficial intent has been brought up. One of the things it says in the narrative is that it's an efficient use, or this legislation would push for a more efficient use of land. That's probably true, but there are ways to make that happen in development without reducing the minimum parking. Also, another thing that this could possibly do is diversify the housing stock a little bit, or help to do that, including, putting more affordable housing on the market. But as Elaine pointed out, that's not necessarily a guarantee, and certainly this legislation is not a way to address the affordable housing and the housing crisis. And then, of course, some people have thought that maybe this will actually create cultural change, that people will be more compelled to stop using their cars and walk. which is a wonderful thing to want, but this isn't going to do it. Basically, cultural change is really hard to achieve, and it isn't usually achieved through legislation. One of the things that was mentioned, I guess in response to reading of the narrative or the reasoning behind the law, is that most of the land affected by this 80% of the land that will be affected by this, I think it was said, is okay, let me say it another way. Basically, what I read from that is that this only affects about 20% of the land in Beacon. But one of the things that I think about when I hear that is that, sure, but most of the interactions with the public and between people happen in that 20%. So it is vitally important that we get this right.
15 seconds.
Basically, please don't close the public hearing, that's first and foremost, but also it's obvious that a study, analysis, and strategic plan needs to be put forth for the use of public space and parking that analyzes the real parking supply, the social cost of too little parking, too much, environmental costs, strategies for change that include all different sorts of creative tactics, and then how to properly utilize public space. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Teresa Kraft.
Teresa Kraft. I am firmly opposed to passing the proposed local law number 1 resolution tonight. If you pass this resolution, it will be putting the final nail in the coffin. There is nothing that you have said in discussion in these past few months that could change my mind. I do not believe that the City of Beacon is ready to give up the need for parking requirements for new builds, refurbishings of old builds. I'm exhausted from constantly hearing that there are no parking issues. We witness it firsthand every day, just beyond the street. I hear it from local residents, my neighbors, and tourists. This would also change the parking requirements in all residential zones. There will still be a minimum of 1 space per unit, recently down from 2. Once the parking requirements change for this zone, it will open Pandora's box to change the parking regulations in all other zones down the road. We've also lost the historic cohesiveness and cityscapes flow when this city recently allowed the transition zoning to pass through without a referendum vote by the residents. This must go out to the general public for a vote. I believe our city must take a pause and go back to the drawing board. We have a new city planner with only a month in the books. Hopefully this planner will look with fresh eyes and bring better suggestions and workable solutions to the table. I don't believe that just because this is acceptable in other cities and communities across the country, it is not the grounds to work for the City of Beacon. We are not a mass transit-oriented city. There's so many books out in urban planning, and they're all cookie cutter. We should not be that cookie. It is a fact that we are not a walkable city. It is impossible for a city of 4 to shop in Beacon without a car. Even a family of 2 finds it hard. Anybody with a bigger household knows they have to go out of town beyond our city limits. Until the day that this city becomes a real transit-oriented city with light rail up from the river into the east end of town and properly scaled community buses that are smaller and more eco-friendly going up and down our main street and spreading out into larger routes along Route 52, and then only then, when all these small changes are made, this should be brought back to the table. Please do not pass this resolution. Get comfortable with what we have. Thank you.
Thank you. James, yep.
Hello again, James Case Leal, 55 Sargent Avenue. I really appreciate the sentiments behind this law and what I've heard, particularly those meant to address affordable housing. Anecdotally, I think we all understand that this is a very important issue. I'm also really afraid that we're putting the cart before the horse with this. Other cities that have passed this, like Kingston, for example, passed their own housing assessment studies. We have failed to do so. I think that before we make any substantial changes to our city code, and any efforts to make major policy changes to address affordable housing, I think that we should first enact an assessment to actually make sure that we're operating off of measurable data and that we have benchmarks to know how successful the changes we make are looking back. I think there are a lot of positive reasons if they did happen, arguments to support this, that would be great. I have skepticism that Beacon is a city that you can live in without a car if you aren't fortunate enough to make your living working at home or to take mass transit to New York City. I think that we have all seen and heard recently, the past couple of weeks, about people needing to move their cars for snowplows, right? For people who live on Main Street, 244 Main, I remember that fight about public parking and that spilling out onto Main Street. I don't think that these are unsurmountable issues. I think that when put in contrast on one hand with measurable gains for affordable housing, that actually might be the right way to move forward. But until we actually have data that we're acting on, I don't think that it's responsible to do so right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the physical public want to make a comment? There's a couple. Someone's already coming up.
Clark Edmond, 2 Wilson Street. It's kind of like 3-card Monty, the planning process in Beacon.
Did you say
And that's
card or
3-card
card
Monty.
with a D?
As in the deceptive practice of the cards and
Yeah.
moving them around and where is the whatever. Because, one, creating ambiguity as to a property owner's right to bring value to their property is not a very nice thing for a city, small city government to do to the taxpayers of the city. The ambiguity costs money. You have to hire professionals, which is an industry in itself, and then you have to spend the money, obviously, and then you don't really know what you have a right to have, and it's sometimes a whim, and sometimes it's not. But Jeffrey, Princeton, impressive. Electric, who knows? Where is the electric discussion in the parking program? A good example of what I was just saying. You know, maybe the council should have played more Monopoly when they were young. It would be less satisfying to make the mistakes that you continually make week in and week out. The whole idea of planning and planning for planning has a lot to do with sharing and encouraging participation. The ambiguity of the document is what is really its failure. It's just not comprehensive enough. And Jeffrey, you can get it done. Your credentials are impressive. We're lucky to have you on the council. And the whole idea here is taking a breath and increasing the opportunity to charrette and understand what that 2-family house can get parking and what does it cost to get it under. Or well, better yet, the 4-family, which is the most affordable way for affordable housing for the city to grow. And the question really becomes is what is the ideal parking space? How many cars can you get on a 50 by 100 lot with 4 apartments? And I'm not talking about cutting the parking.
15 seconds.
So the whole idea is to calculate, postulate solutions, and present them as reliable rights of property ownership to the people who are fortunate enough to both benefit from development, from their long-term tenure, as well as have the community benefit from more affordable opportunities to own their home.
Thank you. Arthur? Yeah. Anyone else in the physical public? Got a hand up? Okay, when you're ready, after this one.
Forgive me, because I haven't really followed the details of the discussion that preceded this, but I want to, and I'm not going to take a position on whether you should vote for this or not, except to say, I want to echo the people who said, this obviously needs some more discussion. It seems like there are some assumptions here that I'm not, I have some concerns about. I wish that people didn't need their cars, but they do.
I would like to know, for example, what percentage of the people in Beacon, we probably have this data, drive to work, and what percentage work from home? And of the people who have to drive from work to work, what's their economic status? So it seems to me like people who have to drive to work may not, in general, may not make quite as much money as people who don't, who work from home. And so they need their cars to drive to work. Sometimes they have two people working. They need two cars to drive to work, because I don't know what percentage of them work in Beacon, but it can't be super high. The other issue, as someone else mentioned, I don't know how many of you who live in Beacon do all of your shopping and walk to Key Food to do it. My guess is not too many of you. Or when you need something from the hardware store, I'm glad we have a hardware store down the hill here, but it's not exactly an easy walk if you're carrying something heavy. You need a car. How many people who have kids, as someone else mentioned, can get their, whatever they have to have done with their kids, get them to school, pick them up, and do all that stuff without a car? So I guess, I wish we could do with less cars, but I'm kind of skeptical about all that. And so I think this needs some further discussion and study, so I want to echo those people who want to keep the public hearing open.
Thank you. Sure.
Kim Ward.
Speak into the mic.
Kim Ward, I'm
Thank
in
you.
Ward 4. I can't echo loud enough everyone's concerns about the lack of planning and the lack of studies into this. It's amazing to me how everyone's just willing to throw the baby out with the bathwater and just give this all over to the real estate development community so quickly, so easily. It sounds quite dubious to me. And it's very puzzling why we would want to do this, because first of all, I mean, we have a snow removal requirement in this town. All cars have to be off the street if we have snow. If we give this over, where are we putting the cars? We have existing parking issues in town. I mean, parking's an issue on a regular day. When I moved to this town, you could park unlimited on Main Street. Now we have 2-hour parking. So, I mean, there's a reason there's that. We have parking problems. I noticed that in the memo it mentioned about Beacon being overparked. We wouldn't have limited parking in town if we were overparked. With Beacon being an old city, our streets are so narrow. If anyone comes to my neighborhood, there's 2-lane traffic. Two cars cannot go down because the streets are so narrow with cars parked on both sides. Two cars cannot pass each other on the streets because they're so narrow. So this whole idea of you giving up parking to multifamily residential, which will eventually push parking onto neighboring streets, will just cause overcrowding. And I noticed with the mayor mentioning that single and two-family residential being 80% of the city, which I really question that number. That's eventually going to decrease rapidly, as we can see around town, with some of the developments going up already. So I really question why we're even doing this when we already have parking issues in town, as well as our review process for multifamily and large commercial developments in town is really
15 seconds.
Is really done on a case-by-case basis. So developers, when they come here, they come fully, they're loaded, they're gunned. I mean, why would we give up that, basically, go to that gunfight basically with a banana. Why would we give up minimum parking?
Thank you very much. Anyone else in the physical public? Sure. Come on up. Tell us who you are.
My name is Luz de Rosa Carrasquillo, and I'm kind of taking a different twist here. I'm really watching people with disabilities. I'm a disability attorney, having difficulty finding parkings or being able to stay long enough and not have to come out. I happen to have a lot of friends that are wheelchair users. So my point is, and I've seen a lot of the development stuff in New York City, and I don't want to see it here. You know, I think there has to be strong oversight and ensure that when they're also presenting developments, that they're counting for people who are wheelchair users. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I don't think there's anyone else in the physical public wants to comment on this. Anyone in the ether, Ben?
We do have two hands raised online. The first is Stephen. Stephen, you now have permission to speak whenever you're ready to get started.
Hi, can folks hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Hi, my name is Stephen Higashide. I live in Ward 1, 7 Deerfield Place, and I'm here tonight in support of ending parking minimums within the city of Beacon. You know, we all deserve a safe, affordable place to call home, but our city and this region are in the grip of an affordable housing crisis. It's forcing people to leave Beacon or to forego other essentials in order to afford to live here. And the evidence is actually very strong that ending parking minimums helps us chip away at the affordable housing crisis. Right now, developers are required to include much more parking than is necessary. It adds significantly to the cost of construction. That gets passed on to residents. Parking spaces are very expensive to build. They add 17% to the cost of apartment rent on average. And that is why across the country, cities are waking up to the need to prioritize housing for people rather than space for storing cars. Cities that have eliminated minimum parking requirements have seen savings passed on to tenants in the form of reduced rent. For example, in Minneapolis, new studio apartment rents have gone from $1,200 a month to under $1,000. I am also an urban planner, and I want to point out that parking minimums are not based in sound science. They're a blunt tool. They're rooted in a limited set of old data that mostly has been collected in places that are much more suburban than Beacon. That's why a recent article in the Institute of Traffic Engineers Journal described parking minimums as, quote, inflexible relics from a bygone era. And perhaps the country's foremost expert on parking, the UCLA urban planning professor Donald Shoup, has called parking minimums numerology, not statistics. Parking minimums are not evidence-based. They have made cities, including Beacon, less walkable and broken up our urban fabric. Meanwhile, the evidence is strong that ending them improves walkability and reduces rent. This should be complemented with policy that actually compels developers to pass the savings to tenants. Ending parking minimums isn't a silver bullet. We need to see you, our representatives, do much more to address the housing crisis in Beacon, but it's a good first step towards our shared goal of ensuring everyone can afford to live and thrive here. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm impressed at the use of numerology in a comment, and I laud that. Is there another one, I think, online?
Yes, we now have 3 hands raised online. The next is Jesse. Jesse, you have permission to speak whenever you're ready.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jessie Van Amberg. I'm a resident of Ward 4 and a member of Beacon Climate Action Now, and I'm here tonight to offer my wholehearted support of the proposal to end parking minimums in Beacon. Did you know that the construction of a single parking space costs $28,000 on average? That is an absurd amount of money to pay for something that is not livable space and provide temporary housing to a machine. And yet Beacon's current city code, like that of many other municipalities, has parking minimums that require developers to include a set number of parking spaces in their plans. That matters because adding parking adds big costs to development, and that cost is passed on to all of us. Research shows, like Stephen mentioned, that minimum parking standards add a whopping 17% to the cost of an apartment rent. In this economy, I don't think so. It's undeniable that we have an affordable housing problem in Beacon, something I've previously discussed before this council. I've talked to hundreds of Beacon and Beacon School District residents in my capacity as a community organizer over the last year and a half, and the overwhelming thing that people are worried about in this city is having a safe, affordable place to live. I've met people who grew up in Beacon and raised their kids here, and now their adult children can't afford to pay rent here. Third-generation families forced out of Beacon after decades of happy memories, apartment dwellers who are barely making rent. There are things that the city can and must do to protect its residents, and removing minimum parking requirements is a surprisingly effective tool in the toolbox to lower housing costs. When Minneapolis ended its parking minimums, like Stephen also mentioned, average rents dropped from $1,200 a month to under $1,000, which is pretty significant, especially if you're, struggling to make ends meet. And when New York City lifted minimum parking requirements on specific buildings, more affordable housing units were built compared to buildings that still had parking minimums. Turns out when we aren't putting cars first, we can make choices that are better for real people. I know people in Beacon have a lot of thoughts about our parking situation, but this proposal is not going to magically get rid of all parking ever, and we're never going to be able to do anything with our cars, but rather it would prevent us from being beholden to parking standards set in the 1970s that don't reflect the needs of our city today. This isn't some weird wackadoodle idea either. There's a reason why cities all over the country, including Hudson, Kingston, and Buffalo right here in New York, have ditched their own minimum parking requirements. This isn't the perfect solution for affordability. I want to make that clear. Housing is a very complex issue. Transit and accessibility are very complex. There's lots of things that need to be done to make our city a better, more accessible and affordable place to live. Some examples could include hiring a housing justice coordinator, using city lots to build more workforce housing, and passing an emergency tenant protection act like our neighbors in Newburgh did. But this is a low lift option that can have some surprisingly effective results. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
All right, next we have Beacon Climate Action Now. As I mentioned before, please do identify the name of the person speaking and your home municipality, and if you're affiliated with an organization, you can note that as well. You now have permission to speak whenever you're ready.
Sorry, apologies. This is Brian Mandel. I live in Ward 3. I also had a similar issue to Justice, I guess, with my Zoom. I am also calling in support of eliminating parking minimums in the city of Beacon. This is an important step in modernizing our approach to urban development, making progress on our climate goals, and it will start to make a dent in the rising rent and housing prices that we've seen plague the area. While this won't come too close to solving this issue completely, the only thing that will is an above-all approach, and this is an easy way to get started here. I also hope the council will continue to undertake more measures towards these goals. I'd encourage you to ensure that the city is ensuring that residents have access to reliable and affordable public transit in lieu of car-centric measures. I also think that it's important that we allow people with disabilities to have access to parking and reserve more parking spaces for people with disabilities. Just to clear up some misconceptions about what some other folks have said here, is that it is important to understand that this does not eliminate new parking in the city at all. Rather, it repeals an inflexible mandate that is outdated and forces us to give over valuable land to empty asphalt. Thanks again for your time. Have a good night.
Thank you.
All right, next we have Haley. Haley, you now have permission to speak whenever you're ready.
Hi, everyone. My name is Haley Richardson, and I live in the First Ward, and I'm also a transportation professional. I'm here tonight in support of ending parking minimums within the city of Beacon. No matter what neighborhood of the city we live in, we all deserve the freedom to get around in ways that are safe, reliable, and good for the planet. These transportation choices should include biking, walking, and taking the bus. But outdated policies from the last century are making it difficult for our city to plan for anything but cars. Beacon's current parking minimum requirements mean that when building new housing, developers have to provide much more parking than is necessary. Building more parking spaces means that more people are likely to drive for their daily trips, creating more traffic, which degrades our quality of life in Beacon. It also maintains a vicious cycle where cars are accommodated at the expense of all other transportation modes. In New York State, cities like Kingston, Hudson, and Buffalo are waking up to this reality and changing these outdated requirements. I'm here to encourage the Beacon City Council to do the same. And I also just want to speak to what I feel is a fundamental misunderstanding of the policy shared by some of my fellow residents in their previous comments. A lot of their rhetoric is suggesting that all of our parking might go away overnight as a result of this policy. And in fact, in cities that have relaxed parking minimums, that has just not been the case. Developers still actually provide a lot of parking. It just gives them the flexibility to actually provide the parking that the market requires. But I do agree with many of the other commenters that adopting this policy is a first step, not a silver bullet. And we have a lot of work to do to make our city a place where you can truly live without a car. And so to that end, we need to see real leadership from this council and our mayor on investing in better sidewalks, safe bike paths, and frequent, reliable transit to fully realize the benefits of a less car-oriented city. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else? Ben?
One more hand raised at this time, and that's Julie. Julie, you have permission to speak whenever you're ready.
Hi, my name is Julie Winterbottom, and I live in Ward 1. And I'm also calling in to support eliminating parking minimums in Beacon. If we want to address climate change and have a healthier and more livable city, we need to do everything we can to encourage residents to walk, bike, and use free public transit. Parking minimums do the opposite. They encourage reliance on cars over other transportation, producing more traffic and more air pollution. And that alone is a good reason to ban parking minimums in new construction. Minimums on parking in new developments, banning minimums on parking in new developments does not mean there will suddenly be no parking at all in Beacon. It means not building parking where it's not truly needed, and it means fostering a healthier approach to transportation. There's another equally powerful reason for a ban on minimums. From my many conversations with Beacon residents, it's clear that affordable housing is the #1 concern in our city. Cities that have eliminated parking minimums have seen rents on new apartments decrease. I urge the council to not only ban parking minimums, but go further and make sure this measure doesn't end up being a giveaway to developers by mandating that developers pass their savings on to tenants. Then we will have a double win, a cleaner, healthier city and an increase in affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else, Ben?
No further hands online.
So I will entertain a motion to adjourn the public hearing for 4 weeks?
So to the 20th, which is the day after President's Day, which I think is our next voting one.
Yeah, you want to make it the 20th?
Yeah, I had that question too about whether or not we're really going to have something to bring back to the public that's
so
substantial.
Let me entertain a motion to adjourn to the 20th.
Motion to adjourn to the...
Someone who wants to speak.
I'm sorry?
Oh, so sorry.
No, I will allow. Go ahead. Okay. Sure.
I withdraw my motion for the moment.
Yeah, hang on.
You're
Come
up,
on.
you're up, it's fine.
And this is on parking,
Sorry,
right?
Rachel Rifkin, Topol as well.
It's on parking. That's what it needs to be
It's
on.
parking, it's parking.
Okay, great.
I actually do believe in the requirement of minimum parking because there is the ADA compliance thing. So if we're talking about, I'm sorry, I'm a quote, whatever, realtor salesperson, you want to say, you can't say walking anymore. So minimum, people who cannot walk, they need parking. They're in a wheelchair. And it goes, I don't know the answer, but you get this away and then and I understand 100% about affordable housing. So I don't know how you make it, but I do believe in parking standards. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I will now entertain a motion to adjourn the public hearing until February 20th.
Motion to adjourn the public hearing on parking minimums until February 20th.
I'm sorry, the 20th is our next public meeting? That's
No.
not correct. Why are we adjourning it so far out?
You mean not to have it in 2 weeks? I think the idea was that we wouldn't have something substantial within 2 weeks. So rather than adjourn it at that point and have people make plans to attend a public workshop that we might then adjourn, that it's probably more realistic to have it be in 4 weeks. But if you have other ideas, please do share.
Sorry, so I just want to clarify that the process is that we'll take the feedback that we've received tonight, substantially workshop it, before re-entering a public hearing, and that there's a consensus on council that we want to have that level of discussion ahead of re-entering a public hearing.
Yes.
Okay, in which case, sure.
Okay, all in favor of adjourning the public hearing to February 20th, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay, thank you very much.
For our next workshop, do you think, could we get some information about the ADA requirements, ADA parking requirements? I've heard that from 2 people tonight, and I want to make sure we're not, this law is not doing harm.
Okay.
Thank you, we'll do so.
Please.
You pass it along to our planner
Yes.
as well?
Oh,
Thank you so much, Nick. Okay. Reports. Okay. Council, which direction we want to start? Dan, you okay?
Yeah, I don't have a report tonight, but I want to thank everybody for coming out tonight to speak up on whatever issues were important to them during public comment, but especially to speak up about your opinions on minimum parking requirements. I've really been wrestling with this one, and I'm not really sure. I see the pros and cons of both, and I haven't made a decision on it, and it really is helpful for me to hear from everybody, including folks from Ward 4, so thank you.
Hello, Pam Weatherby. Thank you for everybody for your comments. I can agree with Dan. I really need to hear from the public to be able to help move forward with this, and also more information from our planner. Just wanted to thank the Public Works for all their work on removing snow and getting our roads not icy. It's nice to see that it's kind of drying out and will be warming up at the end of the week. But that's about, one thing, if we get emails on, positive or negatives on the public hearings, do we put those in, do those get in the minutes, or, because I heard from a few residents on it.
They're not provided in the minutes, no, but if you want them included in the record, I would forward them to the city clerk and circulate them among the council members so everyone has the benefit of receiving that.
Okay,
if you can
thank
copy
you.
myself as well, that'd be appreciated.
Okay, thanks.
And my other understanding, Pam, is that we have the option to read aloud comments as council people as part of our reports. Is that correct?
Good, yes.
But yes, for the public, if you simply email us, that's not necessarily going to be put in the record unless you say explicitly that that's your intent. We previously, in years past, used to read those comments in meetings, but have stopped doing that as a practice several years ago. Is that correct?
Okay.
Yes.
I'm reading lips. There's
Oh.
no captioning. I
Okay.
didn't ask for it, but-
Thank you for explaining that. And also, as a note on accessibility, if you are able to view any meeting on YouTube, we do post all of our meetings on YouTube, and there is an automatic captioning option. That is our current imperfect form of accessibility for those who have that need. But I will try and face you as I speak now. So I wanted to thank folks who came to Molly and I's joint office hours. I also had the pleasure of inadvertently joining Dan's office hours this past week. There weren't a ton of people who engaged, but I will say, having spent quite some time with both Molly and Dan, they're great people to talk to, and so I encourage you to join an office hour anytime that those are available. I also wanted to thank all of the Beaconites, especially in the last few weeks, who have spoken to me both individually and in groups about how the international conflict in Gaza and Israel and Palestine is affecting them here in Beacon, and I would ask my fellow council members to consider with me how we might be responsive to our constituents who are looking to government on every level for answers and accountability around what is clearly a humanitarian crisis. And I also would like to thank the Southern Dutchess Coalition and the Springfield Baptist Church and all of the planning committee members for hosting the 46th
I think it's
Martin
the
Luther King Day.
45th, the 46th year and the 45th parade, right? Because there was a year off.
There you go.
So I think it's both.
Regardless, quite a number of decades of celebration of the legacy of Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King. And I know that this is an important community figure who is often quoted and misquoted and interpreted rightly by many people, and I thought that I would just share 3 quotes that the coalition chose as part of a 2024 celebration litany. 1, we remember the conviction of Martin Luther King Jr. that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. We remember Martin's warning that a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, is less than a positive peace, which is the presence of justice. We remember Martin's insight that injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. We are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied in a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. So thank you for those who chose those words to share with the Beacon community in particular. I, in that vein, would like to acknowledge that today's the 40th anniversary of the passage of the Supreme Court's Roe v. Wade decision. I would bring this up just as a recognition that while the city of Beacon has a population of 14,000 people or so, we're a small city, and I recognize that the responsibility of this seat is to focus on those 14,000 constituents. It's not lost on me that what happens in areas of government far beyond us affect Beaconites here, including myself. And be safe. Thank you to our wonderful highway department for doing an incredible job keeping us safe on the roads, clearing snow, and be well. Thank you.
Thanks. Amber?
All right, unless the date on my shirt is wrong, it would be 51 years today.
51, sorry. Thank you for doing better math than me.
Very quickly, I just want to thank the Beacon Volunteer Ambulance Corps. I joined them for their holiday celebration. I appreciated seeing the facilities and meeting some of the members, but I also just want to generally thank BVAC for their service to the community and just really appreciate everything they do as volunteers. That's a tough gig, so thanks. I had a note on compost. I do want to remind folks that there's been a change this year and that we no longer accept compostable plastics, but there is a good reason for this. It's because the finished compost is approved for organic use. So just keep that in mind when you use those beautiful bins. And thank you to everyone who uses the drop sites and the volunteers who have been working on this program for a couple years now. And then just a reminder that the West End Story Project at the Howland Library, which is about urban renewal, has their closing reception this Saturday from 1 to 3 p.m. I do believe that the Historic Society has their exhibit going longer than that, but if you want to stop by the library, I think this weekend is it, if you haven't gotten a chance to see it. So thank you.
Going with less is more, I'll keep my comments very brief.
I want to, in no way please accept it as trite when I say thank you so much for all the comments tonight. Perhaps it's a bit of my naivete in coming to here, but encouraging more voices to be present in the conversations about how we run our city is really essentially one of the main reasons I did this. And so thank you for your comments. I really do want to encourage more participation and more input so we can be informed in what we do. One of the imperfect ways, but I'm starting again, my grand return to the Recreation Center at 23 West Center Street for my office hours this Sunday, the 28th at noon. I'll be in the Blue Room in the back, as I used to do frequently when we were doing the community energy program. So again, this Sunday, the 28th at noon, I'll be there for at least 90 minutes, hopefully not alone, for office hours. And I do encourage you, and I'll continue to post office hours so people can sit and chat and bring their concerns to me. And again, I think people have probably found, I thank you all for your emails that I've received. And I will always follow up with that as I am in process now. I'm definitely feeling like I'm part of the process here. So thank you all.
We're glad to have you as part of the process, Jeff, as Clark said. Just to echo what some comments have been said, I really appreciate all of the people who shared their comments today on the topics we said, and particularly the way that those comments were framed, not just the challenges that they're having, but also wanting opportunities to have us do better as a city, be clearer for the public and for everyone involved what we should expect going forward. So I look forward to the council and the public continuing those conversations as we move forward this year and beyond. I mentioned city priorities a couple weeks ago, just to let the public and the council know that on an upcoming workshop, maybe not the next one, but hopefully one or two after that, the very latest, that we will be bringing that to public discussion to kind of share what's known and then publicly kind of ask the council after that point to weigh in on their priorities, and then we'll bring those back to the public so you can just have a sense of what the council collectively hopes to focus on over the coming year. As was mentioned too, the snow is melting, which is nice. Just a reminder that the kind of temperature goes above freezing and below, which at least on my property means it is warm enough just to kind of run onto the sidewalk and then freeze. So an ask, which I will say out loud, to be accountable to myself as well. If you have an opportunity to clear off that snow off the sidewalk, that's great, so people can start actually walking on the sidewalks as much as possible where there are sidewalks. It's much safer than in the street. And thank you again to Mickey and his department for doing that. And lastly, I will have my own office hours if anyone wants to talk about anything that was brought up today or anything else on Friday, February 9th from 4 to 6 p.m. at Bank Square Coffee House. I represent Ward 1, but I'm happy for anyone who has any thoughts on anything that is discussed to come on by. And I will pass it over to Lee.
Okay. Thank you. I got a couple of things I got to work through. So also, thank you for everyone who speaks. I listen very carefully, and it matters to me what you say, and I hear you. Second, I also attended the MLK event. I think I missed a couple, but I think I've got around 30 of them now. So, always a pleasure to be there. I also attended the BVAC, the Volunteer Ambulance Corps event the other night, so I were there. I also had the opportunity to judge for the VFW a speaking contest on the Constitution, including some youth who talked on the First Amendment. So I'm just pleased to do that. I will make one comment on the First Amendment. I'm very private with my life, but I actually need to discuss this a little. I have unwavering support for the First Amendment. Anyone who knows me knows that that's the case. Between the city administrator and I think we've probably participated in more protests than anybody in the room or anyone who spoke, although a lot of those is probably more the city administrators than mine over the years. Having said that, I think the events at the Oath of Office, which, as you all know, was on January 6th, and an anniversary of the January 6th Oath of issues. The piece that I want to add is just a single word that nobody seemed to mention, which is safety. And I heard a number of people express concern that people dressed in dark dress and wearing dark masks and not identifying themselves made them feel unsafe. I had candidates elected officials who told me they did not feel safe. Every elected official was invited. I'm sorry I didn't invite the governor or the U.S. senator. I didn't think they would come. But I did invite every local elected, and they all came. And that includes the congressman, the state senator, the state assemblyman, the county executive, and the minority leader of the legislature. I welcome them all. At this particular event, though, no one seems to mention the word safety, and I heard multiple instances of people feeling unsafe. Right? That doesn't mean we can't have peaceful protest, but we actually have to work together to make it work. All right? And let me be just really, really specific about my spouse and her feeling unsafe. My spouse maintains a record of violent incidents involving elected officials. I'll read 4 entries that happened between October of 22 and February of 23. She literally keeps track of this because she worries about my personal safety. October 22, two teens injured in a drive-by shooting outside of the home of New York Representative and gubernatorial candidate Lee Zeldin. October 22, Paul Pelosi, husband of Speaker Nancy Pelosi, attacked with a hammer in their family home in San Francisco. To February of 2023, New Jersey Councilwoman Eunice Dumfour found shot dead in her car outside her home. And 7 days later, New Jersey Borough Council member Russell Heller shot dead in a parking lot outside his workplace. I don't think we should assume that people who we might agree with can protest in a way that makes people feel unsafe. I don't think that's acceptable, all right? And then I will be incredibly personal. My wife and I have 2 daughters, both in the autism spectrum. Our youngest daughter, who's permanently disabled, observed a protest in front of our home more than 3 years ago, was afraid and traumatized by this event, and continues to perseverate and speak about it to this day. She spoke about it at January 6th, and someone in front of her heard it and relayed the comment to me that she continues to perseverate on this. As a result of this event, she has a new item to perseverate on, all right? And what I will ask people is, I really, truly support your First Amendment rights. I do, okay? But we need to work out in a way that everyone, and not just the protesters, feel safe. And we need to do it in a way that respects people with disabilities and respects all of us. And I do believe there is a way to do this, all right? But it needs to be a dialogue and it's not a one-way conversation. Having said all that, I fully support First Amendment rights. I believe in them deep in my heart and my soul. I will also say this is a personnel issue, and I have already acted on it, all right? And there may be additional issues as a personnel issue, but I want to point that out. Thank you for letting me do that. Let me go on to some other business. I am here also to appoint the following individuals to the Fishkill Avenue Concepts Committee. J.C. Calderon. J.C. is an architect who lives on Washington Avenue, has been in Beacon a dozen years. J.C. has served on Beacon's planning board and has graciously agreed to serve as committee chair. I'll release this after I get through this. Yvonne Carruthers. Yvonne is retired and a cycling enthusiast who lives on Glenford Avenue and is a relatively recent arrival to Beacon. Stephen Clare. Stephen runs the Beacon Music Factory on Route 52 at Delavan, who lives on East Main and has been in Beacon 20 years. Oh, and I apologize. I will stop just to say thank you all for so many applications. I've never seen this many for a committee. There were more than 40. And I tried contacting people along the way. I didn't get to everyone. Thank you all for your interest. I can't do this. It's actually bigger than I want the committee to be. But thank you. I just should have said that up front. Continuing, Garrett Duquesne. Garrett is a planner and community development commissioner for the town of Greenburgh and Westchester. That's Westchester's largest community. Garrett lives on Wolcott Avenue and worked on the committee to adjust City of Beacon ward boundaries after the 2010 census. Nick Girton. Nick is an architect involved in community-based property development focused on economic redevelopment and affordable housing, who lives on North Avenue and is a relative newcomer to Beacon. Jay Healy. Jay and the Healy family are longtime owners of auto dealerships on Route 52 and active contributors to the Beacon community. Atticus Lanigan. It's the first time I saw her this evening, though I spoke to her over the weekend. Atticus is an urban planner for the city of Peekskill who lives on Cross Street and is a relatively recent arrival to Beacon. Brent Spodek. Brent is rabbi with the Beacon Hebrew Alliance on Fishkill Avenue, who lives on Alice Street. Brent has been in Beacon for 15 years and has served on multiple city committees. Brent Stapleton. Brent is an English teacher who lives on Mead Avenue, just off Route 52, directly behind one of the Healy brothers' spots, and is a relatively recent arrival to Beacon. Olga Tirado. Olga runs a PR and marketing firm for local municipalities, including working for the Bronx Borough President, who lives on Mason Circle, just off Route 52, and is a relative newcomer to Beacon. And then finally, Jan Worthy. Jan is retired. She lives on Delavan Avenue, again, just off Route 52, has been in Beacon for over 30 years. That's the group. I'll publish this and send it out to everyone, but I just wanted you to know I finally did manage to contact everyone, and I think we've got a great list here. I also thank Pam Weatherby for giving me some input to the list. I appreciate that, especially for those who are, around that area, whom you know better than anyone. So thank you. That's all I got. Thank you. City Administrator?
I don't have anything.
That's wise today.
You think?
Okay, let's do our thing.
Sorry, Lee, can I just clarify, because as you announced the Fishkill Committee, are you prepared right now to share when they might come to see us, or you're still figuring that out with the committee?
So the next step, sorry, that's a really good, I appreciate that. We'll call the group together. I've got to send this list to the chair and to the our city planner and our support, and then we'll schedule a meeting. I bet you it'll take 2 weeks to start up. The first meeting ought to be theirs just to organize. They'll probably come talk to us at some point, but they have to get organized first, right?
Great.
Okay?
Thank you.
And I'll also arm them with the memo that I, armed you all, that we, provided some input that I finalized, okay? Several of the people that I met with in person, I tended to meet over at Tracks on Route 52 because we got a chance to walk the site as well. And it's really helpful to do that. So, but thank you for the ask. Okay. First one is local resolution number 20, appointing Pam Weatherby as acting mayor. Can I have a motion? And a second?
Second.
So that's Amber and Molly. So I'm very appreciative that you would do this, and I hope it's okay.
Can you say again for the public, Lee, just what being an acting mayor entails?
So it's primarily performing mass weddings in my absence. If the mayor is not physically in the city or at least nearby, the acting mayor takes on the role. You can do weddings, and so while I do it and set it in jest, you could perform a wedding while I'm gone. I do go to the city. Those don't count because I'm just gone during the day. But if I'm traveling or under the weather or otherwise, that would be the role. So, okay. All in favor of appointing Pam Weatherby as acting mayor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed? That was your one chance to say no. Okay. That passes. The second one is authorizing the city administrator to execute a side letter agreement with the Patrolmen's Benevolent Association. Can I get a motion in a second, Chris, and you'll tell us the details, all right?
Motion.
So Pam, Amber and Pam, and you're going to tell us why we're doing this side agreement, right?
Yes. So the last 2 years, we've had issues with staffing the police department properly. We've lost people to retirements. The pipeline of bringing new officers online has not been particularly effective, and all of the departments around us are struggling to find staff. At points, we've been 5 officers down, which means that we're out of a force of 36, we're down 5 people that we just have a vacancy, and at times we've had people on who have had injuries or have been out on some other type of leave. It's making it very difficult to meet our minimum shift. We have police protection 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and we've been very reliant on overtime to fill those. One of the things that we found a few years ago that we could do to help mitigate the overtime was to stop people from just burning vacation days that they really didn't want to take. So at the end of the year, if officers had days that they knew they couldn't roll over, they would take a block of time, and because of our staffing, it would basically just result in overtime. So the last 2 years we've tried this. In 2023 alone, it saved more than 60 to 70, about 80 days of overtime that we would have had. So the chief and I have talked to the PBA, and we'd like to make this an ongoing thing. So two things happen with this side letter agreement. Number one, PBA members can sell back up to 10 days a year of vacation time. And secondly, it eliminates there's a blocking provision that if you're only with the city under a certain number of years, that you have to take some of your vacation in 5 days blocks. And what we found in that case is people might want 2 days and they end up taking 5. And then we fill those other 3 days with overtime. So I think this is a win-win. Some of the officers want to participate in this, others don't. It's a voluntary program, and it has helped us manage our overtime, which has been a real challenge the last couple of years.
Any comments, questions on this one?
A related comment, I know in the past, Chris, over the course of the year, you brought to us publicly sort of an update on how overtime is going in the police department. Is that something you can do this year as well?
Yeah, I mean, we're early in this year.
Yeah,
so
I wasn't thinking now,
yes.
but just a
Yes.
request. So great, thank
Sure.
you.
Okay. Everyone, okay? Everyone in favor of authorizing the city administrator to execute this side letter agreement with the PBA, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Okay. Third one is granting a special use permit extension for number 2 for Edgewater Place. Can I get a motion and a second? Nick will take us through the details.
Motion?
Second.
Okay, so that's Molly and Pam and Nick.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, so this is a resolution to extend a special use permit for the multifamily Edgewater project, which received its approval from the City Council and then subsequent site plan approval from the Planning Board in 2018. One of the conditions was that after the building permit was issued, the construction needed to be completed within 2 years. This was previously extended in 2022 to allow it to go through January of 2024. The applicant has requested that that special use permit be extended another 2 years. They've offered the explanation as to why it has not been completed, and the building inspector, Mr. Flowers, has offered his opinion that they've been prosecuting it in due diligence, implementing appropriate soil erosion control measures, and otherwise in compliance with the standards set forth in the city code. So this would be a granting of a 2-year extension. The applicant has also provided a timeline by which they say that they can complete that construction within the 2-year extension that would be granted if you adopt this resolution. So that is what this resolution does. It extends the special use permit issued by the council for another 2 years so that the project can be completed. I would note that the resolution included in your packet on the online version, I apologize, but we've supplemented to make 2 corrections. One was in the first resolved clause. I was ahead of myself when I set forth the year as 20,218 instead of 2018. I want to beat Molly to the punch on that correction. So I apologize. And the second one was on paragraph A of the second resolve clause. There's a building permit that needs to be renewed, and we said that permit had to be renewed within 15 days. In fairness, they have to make the application because then the building department will process that, and so it states they have to make the application within 15 days, and then the building department will process in the normal course of the event, but unfair to say within 15 days it's got to be renewed when they don't control that. Okay. So the packet online has those 2 minor edits to the resolution you may have seen previously.
Okay. Meaning we don't have to modify the
Correct,
motion on the table. Thank
that's
you.
right, no motion necessary because the resolution that you're voting on has been already updated to reflect those edits.
Great.
Any other comments on this? Okay. So all in favor of granting a special use permit for Edgewater Place, say aye.
Extension.
Extension, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? All right, any abstentions? Okay, so, you know, I've been struggling to maintain my composure because we're at the point of approving the minutes. You might think it was about talking about my family, but it's not. It's really about approving the minutes. So I will look for a motion to approve the minutes of January 8th.
Motion.
Second.
So that was
Picked up on how this goes.
Molly and Paloma. Any changes?
No, I had none. I did actually have to go back and rewatch part of it to confirm, but I will just keep that detail to myself. This is my own personal jam, but I have no actual updates.
Well done, Ben.
All right, so all in favor of approving the minutes of January 8th, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Thank you. All right, so this is our second opportunity for, oh, wait, I need to announce that the next meeting will be on January 29th at 7 p.m. That will be a workshop, right? But it's open to the public. And so that being announced, the next opportunity for public comment is now. If you have not spoken at the prior opportunity for public comment, you would be able to do so now. There is someone in the back who may want to come and yell about our new Ward 2 council member? No. Okay. Anyone else in the public who didn't speak earlier at the public comment? Okay, that'd be fine. Yeah. And Ben, anyone online who didn't speak the first time?
No hands raised online, Mayor.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn?
Can I ask a question about the next
Of
meeting
course.
before? Sorry. So I don't know if we're supposed to talk about what's on the agenda for the next meeting, but we were planning on hearing from Dutchess County Transportation about the modified bus routes. Do you know when? I thought that was supposed to happen tonight. Did I misremember?
I'm still trying to line it up.
Uh-huh.
I have not gotten a response from them.
Okay, thanks.
And next week, we have the energy company coming, and we have a presentation about a community solar program that's voluntary. It's, but it would, we've invited them in for a presentation.
Sorry to interrupt, Amber.
So I had
Second.
heard a motion and a second to adjourn. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you so much for
Sorry,
coming.
Dan, I was too quick.
Good night.
Record.